Hey everybody, welcome back to Standby for Adventure. This is John. We're going to talk about something kind of fun today. First off, though, I went to PaizoCon this weekend and got some swag. Yay! I actually had forgotten it was happening this weekend, and Memorial Day weekend. It always happens on Memorial Day, as far as I remember. It was a great show. I was only there for a little while, but I had a good time, is what I mean by it was a great show. It was very small. They ran it incredibly responsibly. I know there was some news that somebody had shown up and had contracted COVID somewhere else at another convention that was maskless in the Midwest. But everybody at this show was masked. They all had to have vaccinations. They had to prove they were vaccinated, etc., etc., etc. So hopefully everybody will be safe. And I know as soon as they found out about somebody having been there that had COVID, they spread the news very quickly so that people could then get tested. And I know any Paizo staff that was there, I know because I was there when Mike Webb was saying it, they were all going to get tested to make sure that they were all okay. Anyway. That's all good. It was a nice show. It was limited to only 500 people. It was a full weekend, so that's pretty cool. And there's going to be more shows in the future, I'm sure. More Gen Cons, more Origins, more everything. And so if you missed this one, it's just one, and you can make the next one. And hopefully we won't have to worry about a pandemic at that point. What I want to talk about today is something for really any level of GM who gets stuck running, like coming up with ideas, and you don't know exactly where to go, or you don't know how to start. And certainly this is good for new GMs, and you can use this to run your games forever, and it is actual advice that is useful, as opposed to what most people say is, oh, just come up with a story and run that. That is not helpful advice for running D&D or any other game. I use D&D as a placeholder. It could be Savage Worlds, Pathfinder, anything. It could be Over the Edge. It doesn't matter. Any role-playing game at all that there is, you can use this advice, and it is actual real advice, and that is, much like every journey begins with a single step, every campaign begins with a single interaction or a single encounter. And that is how I would recommend building your entire campaign. And the way I do that, or the way that I make it all hold together, is not by coming up with an entire story with a beginning, middle, and end that I have planned out as GM, because it will never work out that way, because players are involved and they will go in whatever direction they choose to. So, the easiest way to think of this, and there's actually a few steps to this, so I'm still kind of organizing some thoughts on this even as we're talking about it, even though I have some stuff written down over here. But let me read some of what I have here. So oftentimes I've found that even with the best of intentions, the majority of campaigns end before being concluded. So people move away, people get busy, everybody forgets what was going on, and they're like, oh, screw it, we'll just start a new campaign. Somebody moves, or you move, or whatever. There could be any number of reasons for a campaign to just sort of peter out. Maybe you run out of ideas if you're the GM, or your GM runs out of ideas. And because of that, and that's certainly my experience over 40 years of running games, one of the things that I have just done forever, and I realized this in the last week or so when I was thinking about topics for this show, for this channel, is you don't need to have a whole overarching plot. And I say that because when I start a new game, what I do is I sit down with the players, we all write up characters, and I don't care if you're doing it all at the same time, if you're doing it in different corners of the country or the world at completely different times, but you will eventually, as the GM, see all of the characters come back to you so that you can figure out, like, okay, what is it the players are telling me that they want in this game. I currently, like, I'm assuming this is at the start of a campaign. We may have talked or have likely talked about what the setting is and what the world is, but maybe not. Again, it depends on how you want to run your games. So if I've said, I'm going to run a pretty straightforward fantasy game, there's going to be magic, it's very D&D-y, so whatever the intrinsic setting is for D&D, right? It's semi-defined, but really pretty loosey-goosey and open. I say we're going to be playing in the Forgotten Realms, so that gives people information that they can run with. But all of that stuff, like all of that information about the realms, does not really matter for your campaign, other than it sets up the sandbox in which you'll be playing. And it will inform some of the decisions that the players and you as the GM will make, but that's not the campaign. That is not the stories, that's not the encounters, that's not the characters. The way I do this is everybody gives me their characters, or shows me their characters, right? And I look... let me read this. I'm not sure if this is going to come across exactly correctly, but I will fill in the holes as we go. So what I do is I come up with a broad concept for the campaign. An easy one is, you know, we're going to be set in the Forgotten Realms, and I might have in my head an idea for some type of monster being the ultimate bad guys for this entire campaign. I don't have a specific one picked out. I don't know exactly what's going to go on in the game. I don't have the plots all worked out. I just have an idea. For instance, maybe I want aberrations to be the ultimate bad guys for this campaign. And what I do then is say, okay, whatever encounters I come up with in the beginning of the campaign, I need to make sure that ultimately, no matter what that encounter is, ultimately, when the players do their investigation and find out what's going on and where is this coming from and who is wanting to get things done, the bad guy that they will eventually get to, the ultimate bad guy, is going to be an aberration. It's not a human, it's not an orc, it's not some orcish warlord, it's not a goblin king, it's not a dragon, it's going to be aberrations. Sorry, I thought my cat was trying to escape. Let's look over here at my list again. Right, I come up with a broad concept for the campaign, such as aberrations are on the rise. Whatever the beginning adventures are, and they could be pre-written, they could be ones that you come up with on your own, they will eventually lead to aberrations as the cause. That way, I don't state up front what the threat is specifically, but I can come up with that idea and then guide the players if they need to make a decision about their character, like, oh, who should my favorite enemy be as a ranger? What would be a good school of magic to use, that might matter in some campaigns, right? But just using, for instance, the ranger favorite enemy is a perfect way to build your campaign, because your player might come to you and say, what should I pick? And you could say, you know what, I'm going to have some aberrations in this game, so aberrations might be a good thing. But you can pick whatever you want. And if they decide to pick something else, or they come to you with a story that they have fleshed out that, you know, their town was destroyed by a dragon and they managed to survive, and they are interested in getting revenge on this dragon, or they just think that threat needs to be ended, you can then change what you want to do and make it so that the dragon or dragons are actually the bad guys for the entire campaign. So if I haven't set up front exactly what the type of monster is going to be, I'll just take my cues from the players, because it's their game, they are going to tell me what they want to be doing in it. Um, let's see what else I've got here. So, yes, so it will eventually lead to, I'm just going to stick with the aberrations thing, lead to the bad guys being aberrations, and whether that means low-level thugs, maybe lieutenants for the aberrations, could be humans or any other race, it doesn't matter. But once you get to the ultimate bad guy, it's going to be an aberration like a Mind Flayer or something like that, or even an aboleth, right? Pretty sure aboleths are aberrations. And this lets you come up with ideas for what it is that the monster that you are interested in having be the bad guys, like, each type of monster is going to have different motivations. Aberrations are going to want to basically subvert reality, right? Like, they want to change, introduce chaos and weirdness, but that they control. And it's definitely evil and twisted and wrong. And that works really well because you can come up with some really crazy ideas. So, say in your first game, the players are sent in to investigate whatever. I actually don't like this plot line, but it was the first thing that came into my head. The players have to investigate the source of some new drug coming into the city. And the people dealing the drugs and selling the drugs, normal, everyday street thugs, that sort of thing. But as they go from, a small-time dealer of this drug... Oh my cat is knocking things over. As they go from a small-time dealer of this drug up through to who might be their contact and then their distributor and, that sort of thing. It follows the same thing as any sort of story structure. You go from the low-level guys to the mid-level guys to the high-level guys. And it will eventually lead to them finding out that this drug is not a normal drug. It is, in fact, like dried organisms that the aberrations created so that people who use this drug long enough eventually begin to mutate themselves as these organic things that they're drinking or snorting or smoking or whatever start to take over their brain, and they may actually start to mutate themselves as they're doing these drugs to make it clear that something is very, very wrong after a while. So even if the players get off on some other sort of red herring or, some branch of the story that you didn't expect, eventually there will be an obvious physical manifestation of something in the world going very, very wrong, and the players are going to say, wait a minute, these guys are all like, whatever, the addicts for this new drug, and they now, some of them have like, an eye growing on the back of their neck, or a tentacle instead of a hand, and like that sort of stuff. So it's going to be really obvious that something is going on, and they're going to get curious about it. This can either, deciding on something like aberrations, inform your entire campaign, or it could just inform an arc of it. And again, take your cues from the players on that. If you sit down at the table and your players say, oh, I just want to do, like, one of the characters is a ranger, and they decide that their favored foe is going to be orcs, right? That's a good low-level sort of monster. It can be used to build an entire campaign around, but you could also just use it for the first 6, 8, 10 levels, something like that. You could have the orcs being, raiding from some portion of the world that they are numerous in, and they don't have a particularly strong culture of their own in terms of, not culture, civilization of their own, and they survive by raiding all the other races because they're basically left out. That's what's left to them, is they have to steal from everybody else because nobody else is going to give them a chance. And that's fine. That's a story, right? I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I know people would say, "Oh, that's introducing a weird sort of racism into D&D." That's always been there. It just comes out of Tolkien. That's where the source material was. In Tolkien, the orcs were literally unnatural. And that idea just got carried over into D&D, and now we've kind of moved on from there, where orcs can be just as good or bad as anybody else, and I think that's a fine idea. But in this case, you just decide, this big group of orcs has decided that they are going to start raiding into the safe lands, and you decide that because the player came to the table saying, my favorite enemy is orcs. You can run an entire game based off of that. And just knowing that orcs are the bad guys should give you plenty of room to come up with stories, because ultimately it's going to be orcs that are responsible. And you could do what? The orcs might raid a town, the players have to go and investigate. The orcs are attacking people on the roads in order to steal goods and weapons. They might even be taking slaves so that they can sell them to some other evil country or organization so that they can use the money to then arm themselves and their army. You could have them take over an abandoned keep or castle or anything like that, and start rebuilding it, and rumors start spreading about these orcs, moving into this place that had previously been abandoned, and now it's a threat. So the king or whoever, mayor, town council says, we need somebody to go check on this and find out exactly what's going on. And yep, they're going to go in and they're going to find a whole bunch of orcs messing around in this location, doing things that they shouldn't do. And that's your whole campaign. And you can use that orc-centric bad guy thing for as much of the campaign as you want, and then when that plot line naturally kind of comes to a close, maybe the heroes end up finding the warlord who's in charge and manage to take him out, ending the threat, or maybe they destroy the army, they recruit a bunch of help to go do that, they figure out some other way to stop what's going on. But you still had all those ideas that you didn't need to have a beginning, middle, and end for. You just needed to know, I'm building a story that has to do with orcs. The orcs are the bad guys. Whatever is going on is going to lead the player characters to go fight orcs, and I can just come up with idea after idea after idea of what those encounters will be. And your players are going to have fun because it's all going to be connected. And they're going to see how it's connected because it's super obvious, and it will make the campaign feel like it's built out of whole cloth, instead of you just taking this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece and putting one encounter next to another, next to another, next to another, next to another, and that creates the entire campaign. Now, when you decide at whatever, 6th, 8th, 10th level, that the orcs are no longer fun, people are kind of tired of fighting orcs, well, one of the nice things is you still have a table full of player characters or players with their characters, who have made decisions about their characters during the campaign that you can then use to inform the next part of your campaign. So, say, and again, I'm just going to stick with the ranger here. The ranger gets another option for a favored enemy, and they decide, after having defeated a whole bunch of orcs for all this time, at whatever level they get their next favorite enemy, they choose, I'll just say, dragons, right? So, when you get to the end of the storyline of the orcs, maybe the next step is, oh, the orcs weren't actually being unreasonable. It turns out either they were being forced out of the areas that they already lived by maybe a big bad dragon or a bunch of dragons or a dragon who's had a litter of eggs, a nest of eggs, and they wanted to clear out the orcs to make the area that they were having their babies in be safer. And or you could have it be that, in fact, the orc warlord was working for the dragon because the dragon wanted to make sure that nobody was going to interfere with them and their babies or them and whatever they have planned. So you could come up with a completely separate plot line with what the dragons had going on and why they had the orcs do what they did. This is really, honestly, how I have built most of my games over the years. And that's because I was trained from so early on that we're just not going to finish this campaign. Like, it's just never going to end. So I don't want to, I don't need to invest the time and thought up front to come up with an entire campaign with a beginning, middle, and end, because I'm never going to get to run the whole thing. And if you're okay doing that, then this is a good way to run your games. If you're somebody like Matt Mercer, who now is running games that definitely do go for many levels, everybody is there very consistently. They get to play every week, or roughly every week. He's not building that campaign from day one. He doesn't know what the end is. I mean, I would swear by that. He has no clue. He could not know what the end of his campaigns are when he starts. When he starts, he sets up the situation, and then he takes his cues from the players' backgrounds, or the characters' backgrounds, and weaves that into the story so he knows, okay, I need to introduce something that has to do with whatever's going on with Laudna. And Laudna in this third campaign has a ton of stuff going on with her, right? And then, when that little part of Laudna's story is done, he can say, okay, now I'm going to move on to Talison's character, who I can never remember the name of, the barbarian with the rock in his head and the big hammer. I don't know why I can't ever remember his name. Cameron or something? I don't remember what his name is. Anyway, but he could then move on to a story about that character, and then after that he can move on to a story that involves Chetney, and then he could move on, he could even use an NPC to introduce a plot hook that has some significance to the story. It doesn't directly have to come from the players, right? It could be from other people that they know. It makes the world seem more real if plot lines come out of nowhere as opposed to always being about the characters. I've been a long-time comic book fan, and at some point, reading the X-Men, I go, the X-Men should just quit, because the only reason people attack them is because they exist. And that's what the X-Men comic has been about, as opposed to being them responding to some threat that people are causing in the world. It's people attacking Cyclops, or people attacking Professor X, and people... If they went away, then there wouldn't be those attacks. But you want to be able to tell your campaign in a way that feels natural. And I don't think it feels natural to constantly be having the bad guys attacking your characters specifically just because that's the way to make the game go forward. It's just kind of silly. So you can use this sort of approach of setting up a bad guy or a type of monster as a bad guy for the entire campaign. You could use it for just a couple of levels. You can use it for a couple of levels, move on to another one for a few levels, move on to another one for a few levels, another one for a few levels, and it just gives you the ability to come up with any sorts of encounters that you like, as long as it fits for those monsters. Let me see what else I have here in my notes. If you're stuck in your current game that you're already running, you can start doing this right away. So if you've been running a campaign for a while and you are out of ideas, look at the players' characters and figure out what is on their sheets that you can run with, because they've told you on your character what they're interested in doing. If, again, the ranger has the favorite enemy of dragons, you know that ranger and that player want to eventually fight dragons. So use that. Bring them into the game. Make them the bad guys. Make them important. The players love it. They might feel super overwhelmed. They might have to run from 1 or 2 encounters until they figure out, we need to figure a way to fight this guy. But that's really pretty easy to do, and to come up with these individual encounters when you have some sort of guidance to start from. You can use these also in pre-written campaigns. And you can use them to combine personal stories for the characters into pre-written campaigns. I was running the Ice Maiden pre-written adventure for D&D 5th edition, and one of the characters was an Aasimar. And he and I talked. I wanted to run the books adventure because I just flat out was not feeling creative. This has to do with all sorts of personal stuff and a divorce and that sort of stuff. I still wanted to play games. I still wanted to have fun. I happened to be a GM, so I run a lot of games, and I didn't want my players to just not have anything to do because they don't have time to run games like I do, and I am capable of running them off the top of my head pretty easily. So I said, I want to run this game. He talked to me. He had this idea. I'm going to be an Aasimar, and I said, hey, you could actually be the child of the Ice Maiden. I forget the name of the actual goddess in the game. I don't know why I can't remember that. But he was like, great, that sounds cool. So he ended up having resistance to cold. He ended up receiving a few dreams from her, like communications from her. And honestly, because I was not feeling particularly creative about it, I didn't do enough with that plot line. And now we're very near the end, and I really should have built up to something, but that wasn't going to happen. However, just running that campaign has now gotten me back into wanting to come up with story ideas of my own and wanting to not just run straight out of the book. And the current campaign I'm running, which is that Eberron game where they're all sort of street thieves, is completely off the top of my head. It's not a pre-written adventure. I steal ideas from all sorts of places, but it's fully my own, and I'm absolutely using the stuff that I'm talking about right here to make the game more interesting for the players, and they have thankfully given me a lot of things to work with their characters, even just throwaway things. One of the characters is a cleric of the Undying Court, and he was sent from Irene, I think is the name of the country, to Sharn to work at the temple there, because there are Irene elves all over the world, so of course Sharn, there would probably be a fair number of them, and followers of the Irene tradition, so there's a temple there, and he is there as a Soundgrol, which is like an acolyte, or kind of higher level acolyte. And he was sent because the last acolyte disappeared. This was all his idea. The last acolyte disappeared, so they needed a replacement. And they also found out that there was a book and a body that disappeared from the Irene archives. And when the elves die in the Undying Court, their lives are recorded in a book, and if I'm remembering this all correctly, and recorded as tattoos on their bodies. Well, they don't usually lose those things. So this is that character's hook. I am going to introduce some things that have to do with finding this book, finding the body, figuring out why they were taken. I have no idea why. I am the GM. I do not currently know why those things are missing. It doesn't matter. It won't matter until those words come out of my mouth and I tell the player characters why it mattered. So you don't have to know. And if you're running a game and you feel like you need to know everything right now or right from the start, you don't. You don't at all. That is part of the beauty of running a game, is that you don't have to have it all planned out. It is not the same as writing a novel. At least a novel in the traditional sense, where people sit down and plan out the entire thing and say, here's the beginning, middle, and end. And because there's one person or one or two people writing it, they can plan exactly what's going to happen, and they can write that book from beginning to end. You can't do that as a GM, so don't even try it. If you do, you'll end up, as we've discussed before, railroading your players, which is one of the things you really want to avoid most of the time. Let me take a look here. So, if your favorite foe changes, it changes the entire... Yeah, the decision about what your favorite foes are could change the entire personality of the game, the feel of the game. You can... it indicates the sorts of encounters you'll have, the sorts of monsters that you'll use, and I don't just mean the favorite enemy, but the other sorts of monsters that are in the same environments as that favorite enemy. So if you're fighting goblins or orcs, you could also run into gnolls, you could run into manticores, you could run into like any sort of creature that could live in the forests or on the plains or in the mountains where the bad guy group is located, right? The bad guys might be after certain magic items, so you have to pursue them or get ahead of them somehow to get into a dungeon to steal something that you know that they're going to want to go get, but you want to get to it first to keep them from having it. You could have the bad guy be a god, in which case then you're dealing with maybe a cult or religious fanatics. It could be a demon or devil. Again, a cult or religious fanatics, and go from there. And with those, you have built-in cult members or church people. You have demons and devils. You have mercenaries of any kind that might be involved. Anybody else or any other type of creature that might worship that god or demon or devil. The big ultimate bad guy who is a god or demon or devil may have some other plot that is only tangentially related to what the player characters end up, or for why the player characters end up getting involved. Maybe they stumble across somebody stealing a book and figure out, we can't let this book get into the hands of anybody who wants to use it because it's incredibly evil. But that was only a part of the plan. Maybe the bad guys say, okay, we need to get that back and send people after the book, meaning the player characters, to get rid of them and steal the book. But maybe that's only a portion of it, and the players are going to have to actually figure out how to track back. We've got this book, they were trying to do something, who's working here, what's going on, we need to find out who was actually interested in stealing this, and we stopped the theft, but there's still somebody who wants it, and it seems like a really bad idea to let them get their hands on it. They might want to, like the big bad guys might want to kill off another god and take over its place in the, celestial realm, whatever you want to call it. I had a game I was running years ago where the god of magic was killed and replaced by the god of secrets and knowledge. And that was kind of funky because it wasn't the god of secrets and knowledge who was the bad guy. It was actually the followers of the god of magic who were the bad guys because they were trying to bring that god back. And again, it informs the entire campaign as to what's going to go on, and I can build encounters to eventually lead to that climax. And that's the way I approach creating campaigns. I'm not sure if I'm going to go into any other details here, but I hope I have explained this in a way that makes sense, because I'm still trying to get my head around exactly how to describe it to you for it to make sense, but I think I have had enough little nuggets in there that hopefully you'll be able to pull out and go, okay, I get what he's trying to say. But that's how I build campaigns, and it doesn't take long. I can prep every week for the next game session, or the next couple, because I never know exactly how long the player characters are going to take to do things, and slowly over time build that story up to something that looks like I knew what was going on from the very beginning, and I'm a frickin' genius. I'm not, well, I'm smart. I'm not a frickin' genius, not like that. I just have learned over the years how to not look at the campaign necessarily as a whole, especially from the beginning, and instead look at it as discrete pieces every week that eventually build to be something more. And like I said, nothing is real in the world, nothing is real in your gaming world until you say it out loud. That is when the decision is made. And even then, if it's not a huge thing, you can always retcon and say, oh, I misspoke, this is what I actually meant to do. Or you forgot and said the wrong thing. And players are pretty good about that. And you're not going to have like a huge change to the world because of something like a retcon for one minor thing or another. But that's how I build campaigns. And I think it's useful information for new GMs who feel the pressure to perform at a level that they just can't, or you just can't as a new GM, because you just don't know. And so I hope this is useful. Don't try to come up with the entire campaign before you start running. You will absolutely be frustrated and quit. Absolutely. If you feel like, okay, I need to get them here, and they don't go there, your whole idea is shot. Instead, you need to be able to say, okay, they didn't go here, and either say, I'm going to move that thing that was there to this other place that they're actually at, and I can get them back on the course that I'm prepared for, or just say, all right, I got to adapt. I gotta change things up. I got to change the idea I had in my head, and I'm going to do that by throwing X at them because I know one of the characters is interested in X, and then that will lead to Y, and then that will lead to Z, and then you look like a genius. If anybody's got questions about this, please leave them in the comments. Like I said, I know I'm a little scattered on this one, but I was thinking about it last week and realized this is how I've been running games for decades. And it ends up being a really super low stress, low impact way of building a campaign, being able to adapt from week to week, session to session, plot line to plot line, and doesn't make it feel like you're failing if things don't go exactly the way you want, because you don't have a specific end game. You can just run week after week after week after week. You introduce ideas, introduce this idea, introduce that idea, and eventually you can tie some of those together, and the players will say, oh my god, I didn't even realize this was connected, but it is. Well, it wasn't connected when you first introduced it, but now it is, because you figured out a way over the course of the game to connect those things. I know it's very difficult to talk about these story ideas without it being a specific idea put down on paper that we're talking about. But that's the challenge of role-playing games. You really could be talking about any sort of setting, any sort of story, any sort of game, and you've got to be able to take lessons from one game system, one area of storytelling, and be able to move them to others, and that works really well in role-playing games. So this is what I do. Let me take 1 second here and run through and see if I've missed anything. Change direction along the way. Other people may... Yeah, and there could be players or GMs who really do plan things out, who plan it out like crazy, and that may work for them. I have found it does not work for me. Really, pre-written adventures, well, this isn't a good one. Pre-written adventures like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, for example, this is a railroad, right? But it's a very broad railroad. It's like the railroad that crosses America, right? Or that used to crisscross America that we had tons and tons of tracks for. Because the players can pick any number of different ways, but they are still going to end up at the destination that is written in the back half of this book. That's just how this adventure goes, and that's how every pre-written adventure goes. Every ending may not be exactly the same, but the end of the story is always the same, if that makes any sense. That will certainly make sense to GMs who go, yeah, I get that, exactly. So if you are somebody who likes to plan things out and you're capable of planning it out and it works for you, then that is the right way for you to run your games. If you are a new GM and you don't have a way that you run games yet, I really do recommend this sort of approach of just dealing with the week that's coming in front of you and building your encounter and your story just for that week, and then you will have little plot threads that you can build on in the next week and the next week and the next week, and then that then builds into an entire campaign that your players think is awesome and you have fun with, because you don't have to keep making sure that they're going here because you need them to go there, otherwise the story falls apart. It's really a very effective way of running a game. Let's see, you can weave in personal stories, come up with a broad concept for the campaign, use a certain monster type. You can base that on something that you have yourself. You could base that on something that the players tell you. You can change it up from session to session. You can change it up from plotline to plotline. Yeah, I think that's basically it. That is all the points that I had to cover there. Again, let me know if you have any questions. I know this was a little scattered. I said that before. And that just tells you how concerned I am that this was much too scattered. So if you have any comments like, yeah, you need to redo this episode, please do let me know, because I understand that. But I do hope this has been useful to some of you, and I hope it's I hope it gives you some ideas. And if you're thinking about starting a new game, try it out. You know, talk to the players and say, you know, who's your favorite enemy, or get some story backgrounds from them and find out what's going on. Maybe you want to have, instead of concentrating on the ranger, you decide you're going to have the plot line be based around the warlock's patron, or the cleric's god, or the cleric's god's enemy, and go from there, and that will inform your entire, whatever the current plot line is. That's all it has to be. It's the current part of the story. That's all it has to inform, and then you can build on that, and build on that, and build on that, and build on that, and that's how you get a campaign. There you go. That's all for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Stand by for adventure. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope it made some sense. I hope it is useful to you. I really may come back and re-record this whole damn thing, because I think this is useful information for people. Thanks very much. Please like, subscribe, and share, And if this is useful to you, let other GMs know about it, because I think it could help a lot of people to relax a little bit when they come to the table as a GM for the first time, or for the 5th time, or for the 10th time, and they're still getting their feet under them. And there you go. Have yourself a good day.